Hey folks, David Watts here with another Luminar tutorial type video. I wanted to show you in this video how we can make a better portrait in natural lighting conditions, kind of tough conditions, but how we can do a better job with a portrait. And part of this is not specific to Luminar, part of it is, but I thought it might be helpful to you. Here's an image. I was recently at a nice little corporate retreat, corporate meeting down in Cancun, and I was trying to make some portraits of our various team members on the beach. We had a dinner that evening, and unfortunately the light was really harsh and difficult. And you can see that in this image. So here's one of my colleagues, and you can just see there is a light. I know you can't see it, but if you just imagine it up here in the upper left corner, and you can see it coming in this way and just casting strong shadows, right? Here on the cheek, here on the side of her neck. Just not a flattering look. We can do better. So what I wanted to show you is how I decided to approach it. I didn't have a lot of things with me. I didn't have diffusers or other such things I could use. So I had to try to do the best I could. And I like what we came up with. So let me flip to the better image here. Give me just a second here. There we go. So what I did, and again, if you imagine there's a light right up here. It was just a portable kind of light they had supplied for helping light up the food service areas and so forth. And it wasn't soft. It wasn't that great. So what I decided to do, I got her just as close to the light as I could. Remember, the closer we have the light to a model, the softer the light will be. It seems a little contradictory, but it makes sense when you think about, the sun is 93 million miles away, and at high noon, we don't get soft light. We get very harsh light because it's a pinpoint. But if we can make the light come from comparatively a larger area, that is, we've moved the model close to the light, so the light is coming from a larger area, the light gets very soft. So that's what I've done here. The light is literally just outside of the view of the frame. And then what I did, I turned her to the light because I wasn't really going to get away from some of the harsh shadows, but I could at least put the light where I wanted it to be. And having her look up a little bit at the light, I was able to sort of watch her face, and by bringing her face up toward the light a bit, then I minimized some of the harsh shadows that we had. There's still some shadows, but they're not nearly as harsh. So that's the posing part of this, and I hope that might be helpful. Again, I know you can't see the light, but just visualize it up here in the corner, and you can in fact see it reflecting. Let's zoom in just a bit. You can see it reflecting. It's basically a single bulb sort of thing. And you can see it there in her eyes. And by positioning her this way, it just made a much more flattering image. Again, let's go back to what we had here. So here she is where she's looking at me. The more typical pose I might like. But it just was always going to be harsh on her face versus this one where we got much softer light. So that was really step one. You've got to get the pose and the lighting soft and complementary to the model. Now here's the Luminar part, and this won't take long. What I found in this setting, and it'll always vary, and by the way, this is a JPEG file. I was taking a lot of images, just didn't want to mess with RAW. This is a Fuji X-T2, by the way. So what I found, at least for this, typically these scenes, is that I wanted to drop the temperature a fair amount. And do you see? I'll let that process for just a second. Let's drop it way down here. You see we're making it much more blue. And there might be an argument that says you could go that direction with it and maybe drop the tint as well. But for me, I didn't go quite that far. I kept it more probably in this sort of range here. Again, let's see it before and after. So you see how kind of reddish and orangish, I think too warm it is beforehand, and how more realistic it looks now. So that was first, really step one for me. Step two, I like to come in, and often I'll find that the images for my taste are a little too saturated. So I like to come into the saturation vibrance filter just bring that down a bit. Now you could go all the way down here if you want a real desaturated look. I don't go quite that far. I'm looking for something kind of realistic, but maybe right about in there. So again, let's see a before and after. So before, so even after we did our white balance adjustment and made the image look a bit more realistic, still kind of peachy in here. Let's bring the saturation down a bit, and to me, that looks a lot better. Again, your taste may vary. Okay, third thing I like to do, then quite typically our female models appreciate a little bit of skin smoothing. This one doesn't need much at all. Depending on your model, you may need a little, you may need a lot. She doesn't need much at all, but they still tend to appreciate it, right? So I come to the structure setting, and I typically drop it by about half. And you'll see right away it gives it a very soft, almost soft focus kind of look. And in fact, let's do a little before. You can see, even though she doesn't need a lot of skin smoothing, you can still see, in theory, there could be some distractions, and the skin smoothing just really eliminates that. Now, as you've seen in some of my other videos, it's good not to apply this to the whole image because you'd like to keep the eyes sharp, maybe the lips, the hair. So this is a perfect case where we want to paint this in with a brush. So with the brush, and we set the size to something kind of reasonable to work with, and then we just start painting that in. All right. And again, we may need to lower the brush size just so we don't take too broad of a stroke. I usually have good success sort of painting over the nose, but I do tend to leave the mouth and these other areas, certainly the eyes, leave those alone. Sometimes we'll continue on down the neck depending on whether it was in focus or not. And then I'll try to take a step back because this, let's just click done up here. Try to take a step back and look at just the overall look of it again. Sometimes the structure tool will sort of change the sense of exposure or brightness on the model's face. And let's look before and after. And you may want to tweak it a little bit. You may want to play with the softness. I haven't always had fully predictable results with the softness slider. I tend to find that if I move it this direction, it is a little less soft. If I move it to the right, it's a touch more soft. You might can see it in this area. Let's try that again. So see, there it is at the low end of the softness scale. And here it's a little smoother sort of transition perhaps. Might even tweak that down just a little bit more. So anyway, that's what we've got. That's what we started with. And I hope you would say, yep, we've got a better image now. If we do a split screen, you can see it for sure. See how orange that is? And how we have a much better look. A couple other things I sometimes do. I sometimes use the tone filter. And the smart tone can be pretty handy. And again, it's usually just a bit of trial and error. See, clearly no good. And maybe that has potential. Let's do a before and after. We may not see a huge difference there. Yeah, I don't see a huge difference. My rule of thumb is if I don't see a significant difference, I'll get rid of that filter or reset it. I just don't want to complicate or clutter up what I'm doing. Sometimes tweak the exposure a little bit. You can create a little more of a dramatic look, perhaps by dropping the exposure just a bit. But for my taste, I think it was just about spot on as it was. But you may want to vary that. Let's reset that. Try to follow my previous advice if I can get it to reset correctly. There we go. Another thing you might do in this kind of case where you have some spots that are a little hot due to the light and it being a little harsh, sometimes you can have good luck by dropping the highlights to knock some of those hot spots down. It can give you some unintended results. If you go really far with it, you see how now we've sort of got an orangish tint coming back. But sometimes just a little bit of a drop, sometimes similar with dropping the whites. But again, you have to be a little careful. I've had mixed results with that. I'm going to reset it all back to 0. The other thing that can be done that sometimes I will do is I will come in here and go to high key. So as you probably know, the high key filter will give you this really sort of bright, high key, lower contrast kind of look for the image. I don't want it for the image itself. I might use it sometimes for the eyes. So pay attention to what it's doing to the eyes here. And you'll have to be careful because you can end up with a bit of a unnatural look. So we'll turn it back on. And let's do this. Let's paint this in just for a little part of the eyes here. And again, I'm always looking for subtle differences, not big, massive changes. So again, let's try it. Here it is without. Okay, so you may have noticed, let me change this. You may have noticed a little bit of brightness went away. Now let's put it back on. And it's very subtle, and you might say it's not worth the trouble. But maybe it gives just a little something extra in the eyes. So anyway, that's a few thoughts on how you might make a better portrait in challenging lighting conditions. The first thing we did, we got the model really close to the light. It was terrible light. It wasn't soft, but by getting her close, that helped a lot. Then we turned her right into the light to minimize those harsh shadows. And then some adjustments here in Luminar, or whatever your favorite photo editing program would be. Mine is Luminar. I think helps a lot. Now, there's a lot of other things that were involved here too. We had a nice model. I like the Fuji system a lot. This is the Fuji X-H1. I was using the 90mm portrait lens. This is at f2, so you get this wonderful, beautiful bokeh in the background. The background wasn't that nice looking, but because we can blur it out, it turns out really nice looking because of the f2 and the large aperture there. The X-H1 has in-body image stabilization, which is fantastic because the 90 doesn't have any, but it does with the X-H1. So we were able to shoot this at a fairly slow exposure, I think 1/60th of a second. Thankfully, the model was still. The in-body stabilization does a marvelous job. So anyway, a lot of things going on there, but I thought I'd share that in case it helps you with your photography. And good luck. And drop me a note if I can answer any questions. We always appreciate a thumbs up or a subscribe if you don't mind giving that to us. We appreciate it. And we'll share more as time goes by. Thanks so much. Have a great day.